On my 35th birthday, my parents didn't light candles. They lit a fuse. They hosted a dinner for 250 relatives at the most expensive ballroom in the city, not to celebrate my life, but to perform a public execution of my dignity. I stood there, paralyzed, as my mother climbed the stage like a queen about to order a beheading. With a cold, practiced smile, she reached out and began ripping my childhood photos right off the projection screen, the sound of tearing paper echoing through the silent hall like bone snapping. Then came my father. He didn't offer a hug, he offered a heavy, leather binder. Inside was an itemized bill for $550,000. He leaned into the microphone and told the entire room it was every single cent they had wasted on my existence from the moment of my first breath. "Pay it back or consider yourself a ghost to this family," he spat, his voice booming like a gavel. Before I could even gasp, my younger sister snatched my car keys off the velvet tablecloth, laughing to her phone that Dad had signed the title over to her at dawn. To twist the knife, they had even lured my boss there just to have me fired on the spot in front of my own blood. I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I simply turned and walked out into a torrential Atlanta downpour without a single word. They thought they had buried me. They thought they had finally discarded the family disappointment, but they didn't realize that when you bury a seed, it grows. 120 missed calls, and 4 days later, when they were weeping into my voicemail, they finally understood they had made the mistake of their lives. This is my story. The crystal chandeliers of the Obsidian Lounge, Atlanta's most arrogant event space, were so blinding they felt like interrogation lamps. The air was a suffocating mix of heavy designer perfume and seared Wagyu beef. Around us, 250 relatives sat at tables draped in midnight black silk. This was my world, my father's predatory business partners, the high-ranking deacons of the St. Jude Cathedral, and the self-appointed elite of the Atlanta social circle. I stood by the cold marble pillars in my $80 polyester suit from a clearance rack, white-knuckling my purse, feeling every judgmental gaze in the room like a physical burn. They weren't there to eat. They were there for a blood sport. My mother, Evelyn, stood on the elevated platform. She looked like a gilded statue in a gold Versace gown that cost more than my entire year of student loan payments. In one hand, she gripped a wireless mic. In the other, a large, ornate frame. It was my master's graduation picture. I looked so happy in that photo, naive, holding a diploma, actually believing that if I just checked every box they set for me, they would finally see me as a daughter instead of a project. "Welcome, everyone, to what was supposed to be a milestone," Evelyn's voice rang out. It was smooth as expensive bourbon but held the temperature of dry ice. "We've gathered tonight to reflect on the 35 years since Alana entered this world. But after much prayer, my husband and I have realized this isn't a celebration. It's a purification. Tonight, we are finally cutting the dead weight out of this family's legacy." The room went so quiet I could hear the ice melting in the crystal glasses. People didn't look away. They leaned in with that sick, morbid fascination humans have for train wrecks. My mother raised my graduation photo high above her head. "For 3 decades, we have tolerated a lack of ambition. We have tolerated a daughter who refuses to marry into our circle, refuses to dress like a lady, and refuses to elevate herself to the sterling name. Look at her standing there in that cheap, synthetic suit while her sister Cassandra is a beacon of light. Alana is a shadow on the bishop's reputation and a stain on the first lady. And tonight, we wash it clean." With a sudden, violent motion to smash frame against the sharp edge of the mahogany podium, she struck. The glass shattered, raining down on her designer heels like diamond dust. She didn't stop. She ripped the image out of the broken wood and shredded it with her manicured nails, tossing the scraps onto the floor like funeral confetti. "That girl is dead to us," she declared. I didn't move. I didn't cry. A strange, glacial numbness began spreading through my veins. A cold, surgical clarity I had never felt before. My father, Arthur Sterling, stepped up to the microphone next. He was a mountain of a man, a pillar of the Atlanta community who commanded the room with a single glance. He was a man who preached about the sanctity of family every Sunday while draped in a $4,500 tailored wool suit. In his massive, ring-adorned hand, he carried a thick, leather binder. He descended the stairs of the stage with a predatory grace, marching straight toward me. The crowd didn't just move, they recoiled, parting like the Red Sea for a pharaoh. He stopped just inches from my face. I could smell the expensive tobacco on his breath and the faint, sharp sting of the aged scotch he'd been sipping all evening. Without a word, he shoved the heavy leather binder into my solar plexus. I caught it by reflex, the weight of it nearly knocking the wind out of me. "Open it, Alana," he commanded. His voice didn't need the speakers. It was a low-frequency rumble that shook my very marrow. I flipped the cover. Inside was a relentless Excel spreadsheet, hundreds of pages of microfont data. "This is a bill," Arthur announced to the room, turning his back to me to address his loyal subjects. $1,280,000. That, Alana, is the precise cost of your existence. A collective gasp hissed through the ballroom. "I have accounted for every single cent we've bled out to sustain you. The piano lessons you never mastered at 10, the premium gas I burned to drive you to that private academy, every morsel of organic food you ate, the clothes on your back, and the tuition for that useless forensic accountant degree you used to secure a dead-end cubicle. I've even factored in a 5% inflation rate and interest compounded annually." He leaned in so close I could see the cold, calculating fire in his eyes. "You have been a parasite, Alana. You live in a crumbling apartment, you drive a car I bought, and you are a constant embarrassment to the Sterling name. If you truly want to be free of this family, you pay it back. Every single dime. Wire the funds by Monday or never dare to utter our names in public again. Consider this your final emancipation invoice." I stared down at the lines of data. He had literally charged me for the electricity bill from the winter of 1999. He had billed me for my own communion cake. It wasn't just insane, it was a clinical documentation of hatred. I looked up at him, my expression a mask of stone. He was waiting for me to shatter, to collapse into a sobbing heap so he could play the victimized, long-suffering father. "Is that the final total, Father?" I asked, my voice as steady as a surgeon's hand. He looked momentarily rattled by my lack of emotion. "No," he growled, "that is only the beginning." From the circular table to my left, my younger sister Cassandra rose like a flame in a crimson silk dress that cost more than my first 2 years of college. She was 28, radiant, and utterly hollow. Her phone was held high, a digital scythe harvesting my humiliation for her 4 million followers. She sashayed over to the table where I had set my keys upon arrival, picking them up and dangling them in front of my face like a prize. "You won't be needing these anymore, sweetie," Cassandra cooed, her voice pitched with that nauseating, fake sympathy she used for her brand deals. "Daddy transferred the title of the Mercedes G-Wagon to me at 9 a.m. sharp this morning. Happy birthday to me, I guess." She let out a tittering, cruel sound that rippled through the social circle of the Atlanta elite. Dominic, my brother-in-law, stepped out of the golden light to join her. He was handsome in a jagged, untrustworthy way, the kind of man who smiled with his teeth but never his eyes. He wrapped a possessive arm around Cassandra's waist, looking me up and down with practiced revulsion. "It's a slightly older model," Dominic sneered, smoothing his $200 tie. "But it will be perfect for hauling my Great Danes to the vet on the weekends. The leather in the back is already looking a bit worn anyway, right, Alana? Much like your career prospects." "Give me the keys, Cassandra," I said, my hand extended. "That car is registered in my name." Cassandra smirked, pivoting her phone to ensure her audience caught my mental health crisis in high definition. "Correction, it was registered to the family trust, which Dad controls. He signed it over to me while you were likely counting pennies in your cubicle. You're walking home tonight, sister. Or perhaps you can call an Uber if your pathetic salary can even cover the surge pricing during a storm." The weight of their betrayal was a physical pressure on my chest, a cold realization that they hadn't just planned this. They had choreographed every second. They wanted to strip me of my mobility, my dignity, and my voice in front of the very people who defined our social circle. They expected me to beg for recovery, to ask for boundaries, but I remained a statue of ice. I was a forensic accountant, and I knew how to wait for the numbers to shift. They thought they had seen the receipts of my life, but they had no idea I had been performing a silent audit of theirs for 3 long years. This wasn't the end of my story. It was the opening of a file that would lead to the ultimate justice served. Just as the air in the obsidian lounge felt like it had been sucked out, a figure emerged from the shadows near the service entrance. My stomach didn't just drop. It hit the basement floor. It was Mr. Thorne, the managing partner of the mid-sized accounting firm where I'd dedicated the last 7 years of my life. He looked physically ill, his face flushed and sweating in his tight collar, pointedly avoiding my eyes. "Mr. Thorne?" I asked, my voice barely audible over the judgmental hum of the Atlanta elite. "What are you doing here?" My father clapped him on the back with a heavy, possessive hand, looking every bit the triumphant predator. "Mr. Thorne has something to share with the guest of honor," Arthur said, his eyes gleaming like polished stones. "Go ahead, Thorne. Give her the news." The man cleared his throat, staring at the floor as if searching for his missing spine. "Alana. Effective immediately, your employment with Thorne and Associates is terminated." "On what grounds?" I countered, my pulse hammering in my throat. "My performance reviews are flawless. I've brought in more billable hours this quarter than any junior partner." "Your father," Thorne stammered, glancing nervously at Arthur, who happens to be our largest silent investor, "has brought to our attention some irregularities. Specifically, concerns regarding embezzlement and the manipulation of audit trails." "Embezzlement?" I repeated, the words sounding like a death sentence in that room. "I handle low-level compliance audits. I don't even have administrative access to the firm's core accounts." "We don't need absolute proof yet," Thorne said, reciting a rehearsed script. "But an allegation of this magnitude, coming from a man of the bishop's stature. We have to protect the firm's reputation in this social circle. Security has already cleared your desk. Your personal items are in a cardboard box on the curb outside." I looked at my father. He was beaming, a sick, radiant light in his eyes. He hadn't just cut me off. He had ensured I would have no means of survival. He wanted me destitute, broken, and begging to return to his control. I looked around the room at the 250 relatives, people I had shared holidays with, people I had helped, sitting there in a silence that was louder than a roar. Not one person stood up. Every single soul was bought and paid for by the First Lady and her husband. "You are nothing without us, Alana," my mother shouted from the stage, her voice vibrating in the silk-draped rafters. "Take your bill and get out of our sight. You smell like the failure you've always been." I looked down at the heavy leather binder in my hands. $550,000. The ink on the pages seemed to shimmer under the ballroom lights, a ledger of every meal, every bandage, and every birthday wish. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't give them the satisfaction of a single trembling breath. Instead, I closed that binder with a sharp, resonant snap. The sound echoed through the obsidian lounge like a gunshot, momentarily silencing the whispers of the Atlanta elite. "Transaction accepted," I said simply. My voice was a low, glacial vibration. The confusion on Arthur's face was instantaneous. He expected a breakdown. I gave him a business acknowledgement. I tucked the binder under my arm, straightened my cheap polyester suit, and began the long walk toward the exit. I marched past the tables of relatives, the aunts I'd helped with their taxes, the cousins I'd tutored for free, all of them now staring with a mixture of pity and predatory glee. I didn't look back. I pushed open the heavy mahogany doors and stepped out into the night. A torrential Atlanta thunderstorm was tearing through the city, the wind howling like a wounded animal. On the curb, I saw my life. A single cardboard box of office supplies sat in a deepening puddle, the cardboard already turning to gray mush. My nameplate was floating face down in the gutter. I stood there for a long moment, letting the freezing rain soak through my blazer, inhaling the scent of wet asphalt and ozone. It wasn't a defeat, it was a baptism. I reached into my inner pocket and pulled out a phone that my family didn't know existed. It wasn't a standard device. It was an encrypted sat phone. I dialed a number I had burned into my memory 3 years ago. It rang once. "Identify." A distorted, mechanical voice answered. "Agent Alana Sterling. Clearance Level 7. Authorization Code. Omega Protocol 9. Voice sprint confirmed," the machine replied. "Current directive?" "Activate the Omega Protocol," I said, my voice hardening until it matched the thunder. "Targets: Arthur Sterling, Evelyn Sterling, Dominic Vance. Initiate an immediate asset freeze and a deep dive audit of all interconnected accounts. No mercy. No delays. Acknowledged. The hunt begins." I hung up. Within seconds, a black armored SUV with deep tinted windows pulled up to the curb. It wasn't an Uber. A man in a sharp tactical suit stepped out, holding a wide umbrella over my head as he opened the rear door. "Good evening, Miss Sterling," he said with a professional nod. "We've been waiting for the signal." "Take me home," I said, sliding into the heated leather interior. "And I don't mean that studio apartment my parents think I live in. Take me to the Sovereign." As the vehicle pulled away, I watched the glowing entrance of the lounge fade into the rain. They thought they had stripped me of everything. They had no idea they had just handed a forensic accountant the one thing she needed to end them, a reason to stop holding back. The ride to Buckhead was smooth and silent, the armored glass dampening the chaotic roar of the storm. I watched the lights of Atlanta streak by on the wet glass, a neon blur of a city that had no idea what was about to happen to its elite. My phone buzzed a text from Cassandra. "Hope the walk isn't too wet, sister. Don't worry, the Mercedes looks much better on my driveway anyway. Dominic says thanks for the donation to our Great Dane Fund." I didn't reply. I simply forwarded the message to a secure server. I didn't need words when I had data. We arrived at the Sovereign, the tallest and most exclusive residential tower in the Buckhead district. The doorman, Henry, rushed out into the torrential rain without a second thought. "Miss Sterling, welcome back," he said, opening the armored door with practiced grace. "We didn't expect you until the weekend." "Plans changed, Henry," I said, stepping into the warm, golden light of the marble lobby. I took the private keycard access elevator straight to the penthouse level. The doors opened directly into my living room, not a home, but a command center disguised as a luxury residence. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the entire flickering grid of the city. The furniture was minimalist Italian and cost more than my father's annual church salary. But the real centerpiece was the wall of monitors on the far side. I threw the soggy gray blazer onto the white oak floor. I kicked off the scuffed pumps my mother hated. I walked to the wall safe hidden behind a piece of abstract art and spun the dial. Click. I placed the soaking wet leather binder, my father's $550,000 bill, inside. Right next to it sat 3 other thick, color-coded dossiers. File 1, St. Jude Cathedral Charity Fund Embezzlement Evidence. File 2, Evelyn Sterling Offshore Tax Evasion. File 3, Dominic Vance Real Estate Ponzi Scheme. I had been building these files for 3 years. I wasn't some low-level staffer at a mid-sized accounting firm. That was the cover. I was a high-level forensic accountant, a ghost auditor contracted by federal agencies to infiltrate and expose complex financial webs. My family wasn't just my blood. They were my long-term assignment. I had held onto a shred of hope that they were just misguided, not truly evil. Tonight, they killed that hope. I walked to the main computer terminal and typed my password. The screens flared to life, streams of data scrolling rapidly, bank accounts, routing numbers, hidden shell companies. My phone chimed with a notification from my secure banking app. Deposit received, $2,500,000. Reference, Case 1102 Successful Prosecution. My bonus from the last offshore cartel bust had just hit. I poured a glass of rare vintage wine, the rich aroma warming my chest. They wanted $550,000. I would give it to them. But first, I was going to take every single thing they had ever prized. The morning after their exorcism, the hangover of victory was thick in my parents' Buckhead mansion. I sat at my penthouse terminal, sipping a dark roast, watching the drama unfold through the hacked webcam on Dominic's laptop. He'd left it open on the marble breakfast island. They were indulging in a catered brunch, mimosas, truffle eggs, and the sound of self-congratulatory laughter. "Now that Alana is out and the firm has fired her, she'll be starving within the week," Dominic said, his mouth full of toast. "She'll come crawling back on her hands and knees." Evelyn, the first lady of her own delusion, chuckled. "And when she does, we make her sign the rights to her portion of the grandfather's land trust. We need that signature to finalize the sale to the developers." That was their endgame. My grandfather had left a prime plot of land behind the cathedral. They thought it was a family asset, but the trust dictated that all heirs had to sign off before a sale. "We don't even need to be nice," Dominic added, wiping his mouth with a silk napkin. "I've got a guy who can forge it if she's stubborn. We sell the plot to my development company for pennies, then flip it to the investors for $15 million. $15 million, my father, the bishop, whistled. The Lord truly provides for the faithful. I watched them from the Sovereign, enjoying the irony. It was time to trigger Phase 1. I dialed my attorney, Mr. Cole. Execute the land trust filing, I said. Now, 30 minutes later, the doorbell at the mansion rang. It wasn't the police, not yet. It was the Sterling family lawyer, Mr. Henderson. He looked like he'd aged 10 years in the driveway, his face a ghostly shade of gray as he refused the mimosa my mother offered. Arthur, Evelyn. We have a catastrophic problem, Henderson stammered, his hands shaking as he opened his briefcase. What is it? Arthur asked, his voice tightening. Is the developer getting cold feet? I just came from the courthouse, Henderson said, wiping cold sweat from his brow. We can't sell the land. We never could. Why not? Dominic demanded, standing up. We just have to pressure Alana for the signature. It's not about the signature, Henderson whispered. The land isn't in the family trust anymore. 17 years ago, on Alana's 18th birthday, your father quietly removed the deed from the trust and transferred it directly to her. She has been the sole, individual owner for nearly 2 decades. The silence in that kitchen was absolute. I watched my mother drop her crystal flute. It shattered on the floor just like the graduation photo. That's impossible, she shrieked. That old man hated her. Apparently not, Henderson said. And there's more. She just filed a petition to rezone the property. She's donating the entire 5 acres to the city for the construction of a permanent homeless shelter and a large-scale sewage plant. A sewage plant? Evelyn screamed. Right next to our cathedral? It will destroy the property value. It'll smell like the truth, I whispered to my monitor. I picked up my phone and dialed the house landline. On my screen, I saw Arthur stare at the caller ID. He snatched it up. Alana, he roared. You listen to me, you wretched. Hi, Dad, I said, my voice as bright as a summer morning. Just calling to let you know I'm working on that $550,000 bill. I figured I'd liquidate some assets. But that plot behind the church is just dirt, right? I thought the city could use it for something meaningful. I hung up before he could finish his scream. Phase 1 was complete. I turned my phone to Do Not Disturb and watched the notifications roll in. 20 calls. 50 calls. 80. By dinner, it was 120 missed calls. I sat in my living room, watching the sunset over Atlanta, eating a steak prepared by my chef. They were finally beginning to realize that the forensic accountant they had bullied wasn't just counting their money, she was counting their days. The vibration of my phone against the marble kitchen island was a relentless, rhythmic buzzing like a mechanical insect trapped in a jar. 120 missed calls. It had been less than 5 hours since the land trust bomb detonated, and my family had shifted from treating me like a stray dog to hunting me down like the last lifeboat on the Titanic. I sat on my high-backed velvet stool in the Sovereign, looking out at the glittering Atlanta skyline. It was peaceful up here in the penthouse, a stark contrast to the toxic storm I knew was raging inside the mansion I used to call home. From this height, the city looked clean, but I knew the filth that lived in the social circle of the elite. My phone lit up again. Evelyn. This was her 30th attempt in the last hour. I didn't pick up. I simply tapped the screen to let her voice transcribe in real time on my monitor. Alana, honey, please pick up. Her voice was pitched an octave too high, dripping with a sugary manipulation that made my skin crawl. We were all just so stressed about the cathedral. You know how your father gets. He didn't mean that, Bill. Sweetheart. He was just trying to motivate you. Look, I'm making your favorite lamb roast tonight. Just come home. We need to finalize some boring administrative papers for the trust renewal. Mommy loves you. Mommy loves the $15 million, I thought, swirling my wine. The same woman who had called me a stain and watched my photos get glass shattered on a stage. Then came Arthur's message. He tried for authority, but the panic was cracking his base. Alana, this is your father. Stop these games. That $550,000 was a joke, a parable, like the prodigal son. I was teaching you the value of $1. Not demanding payment. You think I'd charge my own flesh and blood? Now come to the house immediately. We need to update the deed for tax purposes. A joke? A public execution in front of the elite isn't a joke. It's a declaration of war. I logged into my mobile carrier's dashboard and deleted my professional greeting. I hit record. Thank you for calling Alana Sterling, I said, my voice flat and clinical. I am currently unavailable as I am working 3 jobs to acquire the funds for the $550,000 debt issued by Bishop Arthur Sterling. Please only leave a message if you are a debt collector. Have a blessed day. I saved it and watched the chaos. Within minutes, Arthur called back. I imagined the purple rage on his face as he heard his own cruel words used as a shield. He sent a text. Change that voicemail now. You are mocking me. Cassandra chimed in. Sis, stop being weird. Dad is breaking things. Dominic says he'll get you a better car if you just come sign the papers. I checked the webcam feed at the mansion. Dominic was pacing, his face a mask of gritty desperation. The guilt trip isn't working, he growled. We need leverage. Physical leverage. If I can get 5 minutes alone with her, I'll get that signature by force if I have to. He pulled out a burner phone. I'm calling Ray. He's an ex-cop PI. I want him to track her to the Sovereign. If he has to grab her, he grabs her. I smiled at the screen. You want to play dirty, Dominic? Fine. Let's see what your investigator finds when I feed him the breadcrumbs. I accessed the building's guest registry and planted a fake entry. Alana Sterling, Unit 502, cleaning staff. Then, I scheduled a fake appointment on my digital calendar. 2 p.m. Law Cafe, meeting with public defender. I called Agent Miller. Dave, how would you like to arrest a suspect for attempted kidnapping tomorrow? I'm setting a trap at La Cafe. I need the FBI in the back booth. Consider it done, Miller said. Let's bring some justice served to this family. I sat at a secluded corner table in La Cafe on Peachtree Street, the crown jewel of Buckhead's afternoon scene. I sipped a $7 oat milk latte, watching the steam rise as I checked my watch. It was 1:58 p.m. The cafe was a sea of beige linen suits and designer handbags, filled with the soft, rhythmic murmur of Atlanta socialites gossiping about their neighbors' latest scandals. It was the perfect stage for a public reckoning. 2 tables away, a man in a faded Braves baseball cap and a worn hoodie sat reading a newspaper. To any other patron, he was just a contractor on a coffee break. To me, he was Special Agent Dave Miller, the sharpest financial crimes investigator in the FBI. He caught my eye over the top of the sports section and gave a microscopic nod. The trap was set. At exactly 2 p.m., the heavy glass doors of the cafe swung open with enough force to rattle the windows. They didn't just walk in, they staged an invasion. My father, the bishop, led the pack, draped in a cream-colored silk suit that probably cost more than my first 2 years of college. My mother, the first lady, flustered behind him in a floral dress, her face already twisted into a mask of theatrical distress. Bringing up the rear were Cassandra and Dominic. Cassandra had her phone raised, her ring light already glowing as she began her live stream. Dominic looked like a cornered rat, his eyes darting toward the exits as he blocked the main doorway. Alana, baby, there you are. Evelyn shrieked. The entire cafe went into a state of frozen silence. Conversations died mid-sentence. Spoons stopped halfway to mouths. This was exactly what my mother wanted an audience. She rushed toward me, her arms wide open, tears already streaming down her face with practiced precision. Oh, thank you, Jesus. We found her. You had us so worried, sweetheart. Why did you run off like that? We love you so much. I stiffened as she threw her arms around my neck, the cloying scent of Chanel No. 5 and desperation filling my lungs. I refused to hug back. Cassandra circled us like a digital shark, her voice dripping with artificial concern for her 4 million followers. Look guys, we found her. My poor sister. She's been having a complete mental breakdown. But the family is here now. We're going to get her the help she needs. Drop a heart in the chat for Alana, guys. My father loomed over the table, trying to look benevolent for the benefit of the staring social circle. Daughter, he boomed, his voice projected for the back row of a cathedral. Come home. We forgive you for the disrespect. We forgive you for the lies. Just come home and sign the trust papers, and we can put this ugly chapter behind us. Dominic stood by the door, crossing his massive arms, acting as the muscle to ensure I didn't bolt. I slowly peeled my mother's arms off my shoulders and stood up, smoothing the lapels of my blazer. I looked Evelyn dead in the eye. You forgive me? I asked, my voice calm but carrying through the silent room like a bell. For what, exactly? For not paying that $550,000 bill. Or for not thanking you when you had Thorne and Associates fire me? Evelyn's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. She let out a nervous, tittering laugh. Oh, silly girl, that was just a joke, a misunderstanding. We were just trying to teach you about boundaries and responsibility. We admit, we went a little too far. Now come on, the car is outside. I turned my gaze to Cassandra. Speaking of cars, where is my G-Wagon, Cassandra? The question hung in the air like a guillotine. Cassandra stopped chewing her gum. Her phone lowered an inch. What? Why do you care? It's just metal, Alana. Family is what matters. Where is the car? I repeated, my voice dropping into that cold, professional register of a forensic accountant. Dominic stepped forward, trying to use his height to intimidate me. Look, there was an incident, okay? The roads were slick last night. I took it for a spin and hit a pole. It's in the shop. I'll buy you a Porsche once you sign the land papers. Just sign, and the car problem goes away. I laughed, a sharp, glacial sound that made the barista flinch. You're lying. According to the GPS tracker and the onboard computer logs, the car didn't hit a pole. The Omega protocol was activated remotely at 2 a.m. outside of a nightclub in Midtown. It wasn't damaged in a crash, Dominic. It is currently sitting in the police impound lot because I reported it stolen. Stolen? Arthur shouted. I hold the title. No, Dad, you don't. You held the title to my college sedan. But that Mercedes? I bought that myself 3 months ago with my shadow auditor bonuses and registered it to Omega Holdings. My company. And since you just admitted on a live stream to 20,000 people that you took the car and wrecked it, you've just confessed to a felony. I looked at Agent Miller. He folded his paper and stood up, revealing the FBI windbreaker beneath his hoodie. He flashed his gold badge. The cafe erupted. My family didn't see the receipts coming. They thought they had buried me in the rain. But I was the one holding the keys to the jail cell. This was the moment of justice served. And I was just getting started with the audit. The interrogation room at the Atlanta precinct smelled of stale, burnt coffee and that distinct, metallic scent of industrial floor cleaner. A far cry from the lavender-scented hallways of my parents' mansion in Buckhead. My sister, Cassandra, sat slumped over a cold metal table. Her $1,000 makeup was smeared into jagged, dark streaks down her face, making her look like a raccoon that had been caught in a dumpster. The ring light was gone. The 4 million followers were gone. All she had left was a pair of handcuffs that clattered against the steel every time she trembled. I stood behind the one-way glass with Agent Miller, watching her unravel. She broke in 4 minutes, Miller noted, his voice a dry rasp. She's been alternating between screaming for her daddy, her lawyer, and asking if the FBI could adjust the lighting for her mugshot. Your sister is unique, Alana. Let me talk to her, I said, smoothing the sharp lapel of my blazer. I walked into the room, the heavy steel door clicking shut behind me. Cassandra's head snapped up. When she saw me, a flicker of desperate hope flared in her bloodshot eyes, quickly replaced by a pathetic, desperate rage. Alana. Thank God, she shrieked, jumping up until the cuffs jerked her back down. Tell them, this is just a family dispute. Tell them the car is a gift from the bishop. Get me out of here, my skin is literally breaking out from this air. I didn't sit. I stood by the door, observing her with the clinical detachment of a forensic accountant inspecting a fraudulent ledger. The car isn't Dad's, Cassandra. I told you, it belongs to a federal shell corporation under the Omega Protocol. You were caught in possession of stolen federal property. That is a first-class ticket to a federal jail. It's a mistake. Dominic told me it was fine, she wailed. Dominic lied to you, I said, leaning over the table. But that's not your biggest problem. There was a hit and run last night involving that Mercedes. A delivery van was sideswiped in the rain, and the driver fled. Since you admitted on your live stream that you had the keys and were driving, the police are charging you. Grand theft, leaving the scene, reckless driving. You're looking at 5 to 7 years. Cassandra's face went a sickly shade of gray. I didn't drive it last night. I was at a club. I took an Uber. Then who had the keys, Cassandra? Who else is part of this elite little social circle of yours? Dominic, she breathed, the betrayal finally sinking in. He asked for the keys at midnight. He said he wanted to test the engine. He came back an hour later and said it was fine. He set me up. I shrugged. Can you prove that? Because right now, the FBI has a video of you bragging about the theft. But maybe I can help. I can drop the theft charges if you give me the receipts on Dominic and Arthur. I know they're siphoning the cathedral fund. I know they're planning to flip the land. I need to know where the money is hidden. Cassandra bit her lip, the malice for Dominic finally outweighing her fear of our father. He has a burner phone, she whispered. He keeps it in the wall safe in the pool house. The passcode is 1111 because he's a narcissist who thinks he's untouchable. And Alana. He's not just skimming. He's spending it on a girl named Crystal. He's bought her $50,000 worth of Birkin bags this month alone with church donations. He says the congregation is paying for his side project. I felt the surge of adrenaline. This was at the smoking gun. Embezzlement was a crime, but using the First Lady's benevolence fund to buy luxury bags for a mistress? That would turn the Atlanta elite into a lynch mob. Log into your iCloud, Cassandra. Give me the photos of those texts, and I'll ensure your recovery from this mess is as painless as possible. She typed her credentials with trembling fingers. And there it was, the evidence of a bishop's son-in-law robbing the flock to clothe a mistress. You did good, sister, I said, closing my laptop. Now, sit tight. I have a very important sermon to prepare for Sunday. I returned to my command center at the Sovereign, the silent hum of my servers providing a soundtrack to the upcoming collapse of the Sterling dynasty. I sat in my darkened penthouse, the blue light of the monitors reflecting in my glass of expensive scotch. It was time to organize the digital execution. Using the credentials Cassandra had surrendered, I bypassed the encryption on Dominic's private cloud. It was a goldmine of depravity. There were hundreds of receipts. Not for construction materials or community outreach but for exotic vacations and high-end jewelry. I found the file labeled H-Private. It was a ledger of pure theft. Dominic had been siphoned over $85,000 in the last 3 months alone from the St. Jude Cathedral Benevolence Fund, money meant for the elderly and the sick to fund his life with a 22-year-old, named Crystal. There were photos of her in a Buckhead luxury apartment, posing with a collection of rare Birkin bags that cost more than a mid-sized sedan. But the real treasure was a series of text messages between Dominic and our father, the bishop. Don't worry about the audit, Arthur had written. The First Lady is too busy with her charity galas to notice the missing digits. Just make sure the land deal closes by Monday, and we'll refill the coffers before the board asks questions. They weren't just thieves, they were arrogant. They truly believed they could exploit the faith of their congregation to maintain their status in the Atlanta social circle. They thought they were the architects of my ruin, but I was the one performing the ultimate forensic accountant deep dive into their souls. I composed a new email. No words, just a zip file. I titled it, Your Retirement Portfolio. I sent it directly to my mother's private address. Then, I accessed the hacked security feed of the Buckhead Wellness Center. My mother, Evelyn, was currently in the relaxation lounge, wrapped in a plush robe, a cucumber mask resting on her forehead. She was trying to hide from the public humiliation of the cafe scene. I watched her phone chime on the side table. She reached for it, her movements slow and entitled. I saw her thumb swipe the screen. I saw her body go rigid. The cucumber slices fell from her eyes like scales. She stared at the photos of Dominic's mistress, the receipts for the Birkin bags, and the texts from her husband calling her the old ball and chain while he authorized the theft of her legacy. She stood up so fast she knocked over her glass of herbal tea. She didn't scream, not yet. She just stood there, a broken statue in a white robe, as her entire world evaporated. The Omega Protocol wasn't just about an asset freeze. It was about the total annihilation of their illusions. I turned off the monitor and leaned back. The FBI was already moving on the tax evasion warrants. Justice served was no longer a hope, it was a mathematical certainty. The sanctuary of the St. Jude Cathedral was a masterpiece of architectural arrogance, vaulted ceilings, stained glass that cost more than a suburban neighborhood, and an air so thick with recycled incense and fake piety it was hard to breathe. 500 people were packed into the pews, fanning themselves with programs that featured my father's face bathed in a golden, divine glow. I stood in the vestibule, hidden behind the heavy oak doors, watching the live stream feed on my phone. On the pulpit, my father, Bishop Arthur Sterling, was giving the performance of a lifetime. He wasn't in his usual robes. He had chosen a simple black suit, his tie loosened, his hair artfully disheveled to suggest he'd been wrestling with demons all night. He gripped the sides of the podium, his voice a ragged, soulful baritone that vibrated through the floorboards. My brothers, my sisters, Arthur groaned into the gold-plated microphone, wiping genuine sweat from his brow. We are walking through the valley of the shadow today. The enemy is not just at the gates, the enemy is in the house. My own daughter, Alana. The child I fed, the child I raised to follow the light, she has allowed a spirit of greed to blacken her soul. She has come to me with threats. She demands a ransom for her silence. She is holding this ministry hostage with legal trickery and cold, heartless lies. A wave of sympathetic amens rippled through the crowd. They didn't know the trembling in his hands was terror, not the Holy Spirit. The church accounts have been hit with a sudden asset freeze by the enemy, he shouted, his voice rising to a fever pitch. But I ask you to stand in the gap. We need a miracle seed today. An offering of $10,000 from every family who can spare it to pay the legal fees, to save the land behind this church, and to save my daughter from the darkness that has consumed her. It was time. I signaled to Agent Miller of the FBI and Director Vance of the IRS. I pushed open the double doors. The sound hit the back of the sanctuary like a thunderclap. The organist stopped mid-chord. Every single head in the room turned. I didn't walk in looking like the mousy accountant in a polyester suit. I walked in wearing a custom, Italian silk power suit in a white so blinding it looked like a strobe light. My hair was slicked back, my lips painted a deep, blood red. I didn't look like a daughter coming to apologize. I looked like a reckoning. My heels clicked against the marble click, click, click the sound of a countdown. Behind me, a flank of federal agents moved in formation, their dark windbreakers a sharp contrast to my white silk. I marched down the center aisle, past my mother, the First Lady, whose face turned the color of ash. I reached the stage and didn't wait for an invitation. I took the microphone from my father's paralyzed hand. "Good morning, St. Jude," I said, my voice steady and cold. "My father told you a story about a daughter who owes him. He even gave me a bill for my own life. But the audit is finally complete." I pointed my remote at the giant LED screens behind the choir. "You wanted a revelation, Dad? Here are the receipts." The screen flickered. The image of the cross disappeared, replaced by the H private folder. The sanctuary erupted as photos of the Bentley, the Birkin bags, and the mistress's apartment lease scrolled for all to see. The red line of the embezzlement trail led directly from the youth building fund to Arthur's personal offshore account. "Arthur Sterling," Director Vance announced, stepping onto the pulpit, "you are under arrest for tax evasion, grand larceny, and wire fraud. Please place your hands behind your back." As the handcuffs clicked the loudest sound in the history of that church, I leaned into my father's ear. "You tallied up every dollar you spent on me, Arthur. Well, I just spent 3 years building the case that's going to cost you 10 years in a federal jail. I'd say we're even." I dropped the mic. The thud echoed through the ruins of his empire. I walked out of the church, out of the shadow of the Atlanta elite, and into a future where I finally owed no one a single cent.